For 70 years, the aircraft carrier has been the ultimate symbol of American power. Each one is a floating city, a nuclear-powered behemoth carrying thousands of sailors, dozens of aircraft, and enough firepower to reshape a region. 11. That's how many aircraft carriers the United States operates, more than the rest of the world combined. But here's the question nobody in the Pentagon wants to answer out loud. What happens to those carriers in a war with China? Military simulations suggest they would be destroyed in the opening hours of conflict. The carrier was born in World War II. It replaced the battleship as the dominant force in naval warfare almost overnight. Pearl Harbor proved that air power could destroy surface fleets before they ever got within gun range. The era of the big gun was over. The era of the carrier had begun. For decades, the formula worked. Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, Iraq. American carriers projected power across the globe with near total impunity. No enemy had the capability to seriously threaten them. They were too fast, too well defended, too far out to sea. That era is ending. China has spent the last 20 years studying one problem. How do you kill an aircraft carrier? The answer is called the DF-21D, nicknamed the Carrier Killer, a ballistic missile specifically engineered to hit a moving ship at sea. Range, over 1,000 miles. Speed, hypersonic on terminal approach. Warhead, designed to penetrate flight decks and detonate inside the hull. For the first time in history, a surface ship can be targeted by a ballistic missile. The carrier's greatest advantage, its ability to stay far from shore, has been neutralized. 1,000 miles used to mean safety. Now it means you're within range. And the DF-21D is just the beginning. China has since developed the DF-26, range over 2,000 miles. They call it the Guam Killer because it can reach American bases in the Pacific without the launch platform ever leaving Chinese territory. But missiles are only part of the problem. A carrier doesn't travel alone. It moves inside a carrier strike group, a ring of destroyers, cruisers, and submarines designed to intercept incoming threats. On paper, it's an impressive defensive system. In practice, it was designed to handle Soviet-era threats from the Cold War. China's strategy isn't to punch through that defense, it's to overwhelm it. The concept is called saturation attack. Instead of one missile, you fire 50. Instead of one angle, you attack from multiple vectors simultaneously. Submarines below, ballistic missiles above, cruise missiles from the flanks, hypersonic glide vehicles from beyond the horizon. No defense system in existence can reliably intercept everything at once. Each interceptor missile costs between $1 and $4 million. Each incoming threat costs a fraction of that to produce. China can afford to lose 90% of an attack wave and still get through.
Then there's the geography problem, and this one is brutal. A war over Taiwan wouldn't be fought in the open Pacific. It would be fought inside what strategists call the first island chain, a string of islands running from Japan through Taiwan to the Philippines, enclosing the South China Sea. Inside that chain, a carrier has almost nowhere to hide. Chinese land-based radar, surveillance satellites, and maritime patrol aircraft create a near-total picture of surface movements. The carrier that was invisible in the open ocean becomes a tracked target the moment it enters the battle zone. And to project air power over Taiwan, a carrier has to get close enough for its aircraft to reach the island, strike, and return. That means operating within range of everything China has: land-based missiles, submarines, aircraft, drones. The carrier has to come to the threat. In classified simulations, American carriers have been repeatedly sunk in the opening hours of a Taiwan conflict, not damaged, sunk. Thousands of sailors, billions of dollars, gone before the first land battle begins. The Navy's response has been to push carriers further back, out of the immediate threat envelope. But here's the problem. The further back the carrier operates, the shorter the range its aircraft can reach. The F/A-18 has a combat radius of roughly 500 miles, the F-35C slightly more. Operating from outside Chinese missile range means operating from outside effective strike range of Taiwan. You can have a safe carrier, or you can have an effective carrier. In a Taiwan scenario, you can't have both. There's an irony worth noting here. While America debates whether its carriers are too vulnerable, China is building its own. The Fujian, China's third and first truly modern one, launched in 2022. Electromagnetic catapults, larger flight deck, designed to operate the full range of Chinese naval aviation. China now has 3 carriers and is building more. But here's the thing, military analysts don't think China actually expects its carriers to survive a major conflict either. They serve a different purpose: power projection against smaller neighbors, Taiwan's psychological pressure, regional dominance in peacetime. Against the U.S. Navy, Chinese carriers would likely be the first things sunk. Both sides are building weapons that would be destroyed in the first hours of a war neither side can afford to fight. That's not strategy, that's deterrence theater. So why does the U.S. keep building them? $13 billion per ship. The Gerald R. Ford class, America's newest carrier, costs more than the entire annual defense budget of most nations. The program has been plagued with cost overruns, technical failures, and delayed systems, elevators that don't work, weapons systems that weren't ready, a ship that took years longer than planned to reach full operational capability. And yet, the Navy keeps ordering more. Because carriers still work, everywhere except against a peer adversary with a modern anti-access strategy. Against Iran, against terrorist organizations, against any military without precision long-range strike capability, the carrier remains devastating. The question is whether the most likely future conflict, a confrontation with China over Taiwan, is exactly the scenario where carriers are most vulnerable. And the U.S. military knows it needs a different answer. The emerging solution is called distributed maritime operations. Instead of concentrating power on a handful of massive ships, you spread it across dozens of smaller, cheaper, harder-to-track vessels. Unmanned surface ships, submarine-launched drones, long-range land-based strike systems positioned across Pacific island chains. The idea is to make the target problem impossible. Instead of one $13 billion ship that every Chinese satellite is tracking, you have 100 smaller threats dispersed across 1 million square miles of ocean. It's a compelling concept. It's also largely untested, underfunded, and at least a decade from being fully operational. In the meantime, the carriers are still out there, still the first response to every crisis, still the most visible symbol of American power, and still the most expensive target in the history of naval warfare. The honest answer from military analysts is increasingly uncomfortable. In a high-intensity conflict with China, American carriers would likely be held back from the fight entirely. Too valuable to risk, too expensive to lose, too visible to hide. Which raises a question that gets harder to avoid every year. What exactly is a $13 billion ship that can't enter the battle zone? The battleship was once the queen of the seas. It took exactly one war to make it obsolete. The aircraft carrier replaced it in 1942. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. What do you think? Is the aircraft carrier finished, or does it still have a role in modern warfare? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you out there.